We typically treat ancient text as linear narratives, a flat road of words to be followed from start to finish. We assume the path's one way. This view reduces the document to a historical artifact, a piece of the past that requires external scholars to translate its significance into the present. Verse 39:23 defines the Qur'an through a different set of rules. It calls itself the best Hadith, the optimal possible statement. The verse specifies this is a consistent book, built on reiteration, the Arabic muthani. In systems engineering, this level of repetition creates high redundancy. If a specific part of the signal is obscured by human error, the same data is mirrored across other nodes, allowing the reader to reconstruct the original meaning with mathematical certainty. This structure creates a self-verifying, closed-loop network. It is a system that validates its own claims and denies authority to any historical narrative existing outside its geometric frame. The macro structure of this network consists of exactly 6,236 nodes, one for every verse in the text. These points are held together by 343,842 edges, the semantic links that tie disparate verses into a single, unified field. Within this weave, there are over 2 million triangles, closed loops where three separate verses recursively confirm one another. Redundancy at this scale functions as an error correction protocol. It protects the signal from the thermal noise of human interpretation, ensuring the core data remains consistent across the entire system. The result is an impenetrable mathematical chainmail. Every verse acts as an interlocked ring, distributing the weight of the message across the entire structure. A network this dense requires a hard perimeter to define which data it will process and which it will reject. Verse 45:6 installs this perimeter. These are the verses of Allah, which we recite to you in truth. Then in what hadith after Allah and His verses will they believe? Verse 77:50 repeats the exact question, cementing the boundary. This recurring instruction permanently locks the user's focus inside the system. In real time, this lockout functions as a cognitive guardrail. Every time the reader attempts to explain a verse using external traditions, the network redirects their logic back into the closed loop of the book. Importing data from outside this system violates its internal logic. To the network, secondary traditions are foreign noise that must be filtered out for the system to remain stable. Constructing a parallel system with this level of topological depth is simply impossible to sustain through human effort. Verse 52:34 issues a direct challenge to the reader. Then let them produce a hadith like it, if they are truthful. Human intellect is limited by linear perspective. We cannot engineer a non-contradictory network of thousands of interacting nodes that preserves its integrity across multiple scales of time and context. The structure stands in its own category. Divine revelation, by design, cannot be replicated through human consensus. Because the network cannot be mimicked, the primary threat to its integrity is internal distortion. Verse 41:40 warns against those who insert deviation into the verses. Deviation is essentially fragmentation. When a single verse is disconnected from the recursive network, links is immediately filled by external conjecture. The verse is no longer anchored to the book. It is anchored only to the assumptions of the reader. Verse 6:116 identifies the source of this noise, the majority of those on earth who follow nothing but guesswork. Within the topology of the Qur'an, majority opinion is irrelevant to the truth of the signal. Consensus is often just a volume control for error. Relying on inherited narratives shatters the internal armor of the text. It replaces the reinforced chainmail with the fragile threats of human history. This collapse is a psychological process that begins the moment a reader engages with the book. It starts as hesitation. When confronted by an absolute closed system that demands total intellectual surrender, the reader recoils. Verse 53:59 asks, "Then at this statement do you marvel?" Hesitation then turns into indifference. Verse 56:81 identifies this stage. "Then is it to this statement that you are indifferent?" This creates an unperceived departure from the signal. The reader is still reading the words, but they are no longer seeing the structure. Verse 68:44 describes the consequence. For those who disregard the signal, the system leads them away through paths they do not recognize. Intellectual failure happens the moment a reader chooses comfortable, human assumptions over the direct, uncompromising light of the book. Human interpretations fluctuate, but the original text remains a fixed, immutable structure. To access its protection, the reader must hold firmly to the chainmail. They must allow verse to explain verse, refusing to let external data override the internal network. The final seal of the system is found in verse 41-41. The declaration, "Indeed, it is a mighty book," points to the inherent strength of its design. The structure remains perfectly intact, regardless of the noise surrounding it. The book cannot be broken. Only the reader's alignment with it can fail. The failure is always found in the user, never in the network. The Qur'an presents itself as the decisive statement, the absolute criterion. Its authority is locked behind an internal geometry of over 6,000 interlocking gates. Attempting to move authority outside these verses leads to immediate intellectual collapse. When we respect its boundaries, the text reveals an unbreakable architecture of divine logic. To truly read the Qur'an is to stop searching for history and start surrendering to geometry. You must wear the chainmail and let the book